And welcome into the latest episode of the Dribble Drive podcast. Austin Render with you. Our guest, Mike Koon of the Illini Sports Network, will join us here in just a moment. Want to let you know as we get you into another episode here of this podcast that we really do appreciate all those who have kind of reached out to us, talked about how much they've enjoyed the show. It seems to so far have been a hit, so we greatly appreciate those of you who are listening along with us. Just a reminder to subscribe, download. That's the type of stuff that helps us know that you're listening. So again, like and subscribe. We're on Apple. We're on Spotify podcasts. We're on the Back Home Network YouTube page. So take a look at that as we go through here. A couple of things I just want to touch on early. Big Ten news and headlines going on right now. Maryland is out in Croatia on a summer tour right now. They won their first two games of the tournament. We're recording this a little bit before, so far they have won their first two games. I believe they have one more. We're recording this after the first two. Cheyenne Sellers and Bree McDaniel led the way in game one with a combined 24 points. Sellers had another 15 points in game two. It was actually freshman Brianna Williams who led the Terps with 20 points in game two. They had 6 total players in double figures in that game. So Maryland getting some good summer experience in Croatia. Minnesota actually has a women's basketball podcast dropping season 3. Actually dropped the last week. Amaya Battle, Mara Braun, and Sophie Hart were all on it. So we certainly want you to listen to our podcast, but that seems like a great one if you're a Minnesota Golden Gophers fan. It's called Gold Blooded. So go check that out as well. And Indiana women's basketball has expanded its season ticket area to the entire lower bowl of Simon Scott Assembly Hall, which is great news for the Hoosiers, who continue to sell lots of tickets. One of the best attended teams in the conference last season. All right, let's bring in our guest here. He is the voice of the Illinois women's basketball program on the Illini Sports Network, Mike Koon. Mike, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate you giving us some of your time here in your busy summer. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Summer's going by fast, as it is for everybody, and it's always no matter what time of the year, it's always nice to talk women's basketball.
Yeah, that's kind of been my thing. Every one of these episodes, I get fired up for the season, just talking about some basketball. And just to kind of set the table for those who are unfamiliar maybe with you and the Illini Sports Network, kind of talk about where you've come from, your journey to getting to this position that you're at now.
Well, I've always wanted to be in sports broadcasting since I can remember, since I knew I was not good enough to play for the Cubs back very early in my life. But I went to North Central College, which is one of the top has one of the top sports radio programs in the country, and from there have dabbled in sports broadcasting, but not full time. I was in sports information at North Central and at Illinois. I was at Illinois for 14 years in sports information, and have been on Illini women's basketball games since 1998. So even after I left, I stayed on to do the analyst for Dave Loan, who was there for over 30 years, and then he retired. And I believe this is year 5 for me as far as the play-by-play voice for the Fighting Illini.
Yeah, very cool. I know you've been there for my 3 years in the conference. Always enjoy getting out to the State Farm Center and catching up with you. Let's talk about this Illini team. This is a team that had a huge resurgence 2 seasons ago in the first year of Shauna Green, a ginormous turnaround. It had been struggling the few years prior. When you look back at that 22-23 season, I'm sure there's a lot of fond memories for you all from that year. What stands out to you on what Shauna Green was able to do kind of immediately when she got to the program?
Well, we got some momentum, and it starts with the recruiting. She was able to convince some of her top players at Dayton, namely Makaira Cook and Bryn Shoup-Hill, to join the fold. To keep Kendall Bostic, actually 4 of the players on the team were recruited by Shauna Green prior to coming to Illinois. Kendall Bostic, it actually was down to Dayton and Michigan State before she settled on Michigan State and then transferred to Illinois. And then Genesis Bryant was heavily recruited by Shauna Green at Dayton and then transferred in from NC State. And ironically, Jada Peebles was on the verge. She had entered the transfer portal and was going to transfer to Dayton to play for Shauna Green when Shauna Green got the job at Illinois. So there were a lot of players that she was able to bring in to form that core for 2 years ago. And, we got some momentum. I think the win at Missouri right before Christmas really established and gave them the belief that there was something special going on. And then when Iowa came to town on New Year's Day, Caitlin Clark and company, Genesis Bryant hit a big three at the end of the first half. And Illinois led most of that game. Clark fouled out towards the end, and Illinois won that one 95-91. And that was the game that I think sounded the idea that Illinois was going to be a contender. They won some big games that year, and obviously played well. I think right before that Missouri game, Makaira had 33 points at Indiana in a near upset. Missed some shots late. Otherwise, Illinois might have won that game. So It was kind of a magical year, and they had some momentum. They won 11 games. They made it to the quarterfinals of the Big Ten tournament, and then ultimately they made their first NCAA in 20 years and lost in the first four to Mississippi State.
And it's crazy to sit here now in 2024. And if I had sat here 2 or 3 years ago with you and tell you that last season, the results on paper, you'd sit postseason and maybe think that was a disappointment. Just because I think in 4 or 5 years ago, this program would have loved to have a season like last year. But I think that's the sign of a growing program, is that you have a somewhat successful win-loss record season comparatively, but it's still a down year because of what you were able to do the year before. What do you think didn't click, or what was there something that you noticed last season, or was it just kind of a sophomore slump and they're going to jump right back at it this year?
Well, you can certainly point to the fact that Makaira Cook had a concussion early in the year. And all the momentum we talked about from 2 years ago just didn't happen. And I think it started there. And even when Makaira was 100%, we played a little tougher non-conference schedule. We played Notre Dame in Washington, D.C. We didn't win the Missouri game. And that things never quite picked up until late in the year. Illinois was playing NCAA quality basketball towards the end of the year. They had that 20-point win against Indiana. They won at Michigan. It was a wire-to-wire win. And so they were playing really well at the end of the year. Unfortunately, they were one game under 500. But the run in the WBIT, 2 games at home, 1 game at Tulsa, and then victories over Washington State and Villanova in the Final Four at Butler, gave them 19 wins. And so you look at the combined 41 wins for Shauna Green in 2 years. And that as tough a season as it was, certainly towards the middle part of that year, the momentum at the end of the year, combined with their top 4 players announcing that they're coming back, 3 fifth-year seniors, certainly gives them momentum going into this year. And then, of course, we have a McDonald's All-America coming in, which we haven't had. I think things are looking in the right direction again for Illinois.
It's almost like we think similarly in our broadcast brains here, because you go right to where I was going next, which is this core that you're returning, because now it's year 3 of Shauna Green. And in all 3 of those years, she has had Makaira Cook, Genesis Bryant, Kendall Bostic, Adalia McKenzie, and they're all back again. I would imagine that's got to make everybody within and around the program feel a lot more comfortable that there's a bounce back year coming here in 24-25.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt about that. I think the schedule will not be quite as tough non-conference, especially given the fact that the 4 teams that are coming in, particularly USC and UCLA, will give Illinois all that they need in terms of RPI and the net rankings and all that stuff. So I think, maybe in 2 years ago, we had to play in the first 4 because of our non-conference schedule. We beefed it up, and then didn't have the momentum we wanted in year 2, and I think it's going to be sort of in between non-conference this year. But yeah, I mean, when you're playing with 22, 23-year-olds across the board, I really expect if there is a such thing as a breakout season for Adalia McKenzie, I think from a national standpoint, I think she's one that I'm looking to. Defensively, she was the lockdown defender on Lucy Olson in the championship game of the WBIT, and now Lucy Olson is transferring to Iowa. So it'll be interesting to see how she does in her final year there. But having her, and then, of course, Makaira and Genesis, the backcourt is going to be as good as any combined backcourt in the Big Ten, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, almost 42 points a game coming from those three, McKenzie, Cook, and Bryant. And not only that, but they've played together now for 2 full seasons. It feels like you were talking about momentum. There's a lot of momentum with them. Kendall Bostic is somebody that I just really enjoy watching her play. You and I have talked about this several times. She's undersized for the position she's being asked to play within the Big Ten, and yet just continually produces game after game, year after year. I've been so impressed watching her. You get to see her a lot more. What impresses you about Kendall Bostic's game?
I think she is the quintessential rebounder in terms of how to rebound. If you're gonna have a tape on how to rebound, Kendall Bostic is it. She has a nose for the ball. And there are times that she has a double-double in the first half. She's had games of 16, 17, 18 rebounds. And as you mentioned, undersized, 5'10", 5'11". The thing that we've tried to try to get a 5 so that she can step out. I think having Camille Hobby last year helped her come out and show her range. And she's gotten better every year in terms of her point production and the other parts of her game. She's become a really good passer, a student of the game, certainly. But in terms of rebounding, for her size, there can't be a better rebounder in the country for her size than Kendall Bostic.
Yeah, she's just continually, she has a nose for the basketball. She seems to find it better than anybody that we see in the Big Ten, just day in and day out doing the dirty work for this team down low. You mentioned the McDonald's All-American that's coming into the program here this year, which is a new kind of phrase for Illinois here, Barry Wallace. Obviously, we haven't gotten to see our teams yet, but what do you know about what Barry Wallace will be bringing to the program?
Yeah, I mean, very similar type player, I would say, to Adalia McKenzie, maybe a step up there. She has, the basketball in the state of Ohio is really, really good. She's had a chance to play on some of the U.S. teams as well as the McDonald's All-America game. She's athletic. She can jump. She can shoot. I mean, she's got all the tools it takes to be a really elite level player. And she will fit in, there's no doubt, this year for this Illinois team. And, you mentioned all the players coming back, and certainly that's going to mean we will say goodbye for sure to those 4 players we mentioned before. And that's going to mean that going forward, this is going to be Barry Wallace's team. And so I think she has a chance she has the benefit of the fact to not have the pressure. A lot of times I would say a program like Illinois, if you sign a McDonald's All-American, there's some pressure to come in and produce right away and be the player. But she's not going to have that this year. I think I would expect her to have some breakout games. But she's going to be the future for the Illini, and maybe what it takes to put us over the top and get us a win in the NCAA tournament this year.
Do you think there's a world where she's a day one starter along with those 4 players we mentioned, or do you see her as a bench player?
Well, I mean, it depends on what the lineup is going to look like for Shauna Green. I mean, obviously, if that's the case, then Kendall Bostic becomes the 5. I mean, certainly she's going to be in the mix. So in our 7-8 player rotation, Barry Wallace is going to be in there for sure. It's just going to be a matter of maybe how the post players develop. We got a transfer in Letty Vasconcelos from Baylor. 6'7", was a sixth-ranked center in the class from 2 years ago. Didn't play a lot at Baylor last year. And so if she comes in and establishes herself as the 5, we start the other 4. We bring Illinois can bring Barry Wallace off the bench. If we want to go small, and depending on what the matchup is, it's potential for Barry Wallace to start, and then and Kendall Bostic would play the 5. But we'll see how things develop. As you mentioned, we haven't really had a chance to see our teams a lot this year. We'll see them a little bit. We have a foreign trip coming up in August, and that'll be a good test to see how everybody fits in.
Well, we'll talk about that foreign trip here in a minute, but yeah, I thought that Camille Hobby Illinois started playing its best basketball when you had Hobby and Bostic playing together down low, and I would imagine they're looking for that with Vasconcelos as the transfer. Also bringing in Jasmine Brown-Hager from Mississippi State. Gretchen Dolan returns, and she had some good minutes last year as well, so there's definitely a lot of options for Illinois. One of the big things that's changed, obviously, this tends to come with winning as well, but just a change in the atmosphere at State Farm Center, the fan support. Talk about what that's been like the past couple of seasons and seeing the fan base grow.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And certainly the season ticket, the areas you mentioned at the top, the expanded sections of season tickets at Simon Scott Assembly Hall, the same thing is true at State Farm Center. In fact, there are the expanded Orange Crush section. 3 years ago, it was hard to get 50 students at a game. And now, with the momentum that the team has, certainly the student section is there, and we've expanded the student section. So, when you've got that, the students down low and making the noise, certainly that's going to help the atmosphere, and the community has gotten into it as well. And I haven't seen the updated season ticket numbers, but I know it's up, and it's become a home court advantage, and we haven't had that prior to Shauna Green, really since Teresa Grintz was here. So that makes a difference, and certainly when you're bringing recruits in, and you've got the atmosphere that you can sell, it's going to make a difference going forward in the program.
Yeah, there's every coach will tell you the atmosphere, the home court advantage is a huge recruiting tool, and Illinois is certainly getting that. The Nuggets, I always love coming there and having the free throws for Nuggets is always fun to me. Gives the opponents a little extra something to think about when they're at the line after missing the first free throw. For those who don't know, when you go to Illinois, they have a special running where if the opponent misses both free throws in a trip to the line, is it everybody gets free Nuggets? Is that what it is, Mike?
Yeah, there's a free Nuggets in the app at Champaign area McDonald's. So
there you go. So yeah. That's why if you ever hear Nuggets being chanted or anything like that during an Illinois game, that's the premise there. We've talked a lot about the 2020 this past year's team, and you said they're playing their best basketball at the end. So how does this team go about trying to get that momentum they had 2 years ago back? And especially amidst a Big Ten conference, it's not getting any easier. You're adding 2 preseason top 5 to 10 teams in the country. You're adding 2 other good ones in Oregon and Washington. So how does Illinois go about trying to get back into the NCAA tournament?
Well, I think the foreign trip has come at the very right time, because they're going to Italy and Greece in early August, right before the start of school, and it's all those pieces that the newcomers that are going to be important. And one player we haven't really talked about is Bryn Shoop Hill, who had some injuries last year, was a starter at the beginning of the year, and then came off the bench. We mentioned playing Camille Hobby and Kendall Bostic together. If Illinois can get Bryn Shoop Hill healthy, and she'll get a chance to play some in this foreign trip, you see this a lot where the teams that have that experience, they have the extra practices in the summer, then they get a chance to bond in the European trip or wherever they go. that's, I think, just going to lead right into the start of practice. And there's certainly the belief that Illinois can be in the mix and can be really, really good. Can play with most anybody in the country. Certainly the win against Indiana late was a good confidence booster that maybe Illinois is back. But that foreign trip, I think, comes at the exact right time, and I think will be a big benefit to this program.
Yeah, so they're heading off to Europe, correct? Is it Italy and Greece that
That's
they're heading
right.
off to?
Yeah.
So that'll be a ton of fun for them. And I know the Hoosiers got to go last year out in that same area, and it's just such a great opportunity for the ladies to kind of now in Illinois' sense, it's a lot of returners, but still to come together to make sure the pieces fit. And I think, like you said, one of the biggest advantages of it is getting those extra practice days. That's a big thing in the summer, getting your team together a little bit earlier. You look at social media right now, every team is doing their summer workouts, they're doing their camps and whatnot. But to get those actual, I think it's 10 practice days that you get around these trips is huge. Maryland, as we mentioned, is out in Croatia right now, getting their opportunity to do it. Illinois will be heading overseas here shortly. We had Dalton Shetler on last week from Michigan State. One of the things I want to do when I have other broadcasters on, just talking about what it's like to broadcast in the Big Ten. Where's some of your favorite places when you get to go on the road, arena-wise, atmosphere-wise, broadcast location, factoring all that in? Where do you enjoy broadcasting from in the Big Ten?
Well, I would say Purdue because you're right on the floor, but now they put us all the way back up at the top. Mackey Arena.
I think Tim kicked us out. He didn't want us down there anymore.
I think Nebraska probably stands out for me. I like just the building itself. They've thought of everything, and we're across the way on the floor. They have great fans there, and I would say at the top of my list would be Nebraska. When Purdue was good, that was a good atmosphere. Certainly IU. I like the fact that you may be a little bit off the floor, but you're still in it. And from where we sit, there's a lot of interaction with the fans because the fans are coming up to that section. Come right by your broadcast location, so that can be kind of interesting. But those are good places. Michigan State, we used to be right on the floor, and now that they've bumped the visiting radio up a little bit. So I like the fact that those places where we can be right in the heart of the action on the floor is nice. But ever since they built the new arena at Nebraska to move out of Devaney, I like going there.
I love Pinnacle Bank. That's one of my favorites too. And I think interesting is a very polite word to use for the mix up with our fans. Not that I'm not coming after our fans by any means, but it's an interesting spot. They're walking right by you the entire pregame. They got to go to the concessions. They go down right in front of you. It's a whole thing. But yeah, definitely interesting would be a good polite way of phrasing that one. In terms of college towns that we get to go to, I know we're only there for 24 hours or whatever it may be, but do you have a place that you enjoy when you see that on the schedule? You enjoy getting to go that way?
Penn State's always, depending on where we stay, and we've stayed at the Nittany Lion Inn, and we've stayed at a couple of other places. But if you're staying close to campus, we go to usually within walking distance of the Creamery. There's several, the downtown area at Penn State. There's a couple good breakfast spots there, and any place you can go where you can kind of walk around. Nebraska again, if you're within a couple blocks of the Haymarket district, that's always kind of a fun place to go. But it's always fun. It's always fun going to Penn State, I think.
Penn State's a good choice. If you can get to the Creamery, it's always a better trip. If you can make a trip there and make your trip up to Happy Valley even more worthwhile. Just looking at the 24-25, obviously we don't have full schedule yet, but looking at the Big Ten opponents for Illinois, and with the new schedule, with the 4 teams added, it's still 18 games. You play one team twice, everybody else once. So Illinois' home and away is Northwestern. You go to LA. UCLA and USC, and Washington, Oregon, the Northwest schools will come to Illinois. When you look at some of these away onlys, Indiana, Maryland, Ohio State, UCLA, USC, it's a bit of a tough draw. But when you look at the schedule, how do you feel like it shook out for Illinois?
Well, as you mentioned, there's only one team you play twice, and that's going to be the travel partner, if you will, at Northwestern. So in that respect, in the old Big Ten, it really mattered maybe the 5 teams that you played twice. This, you're playing almost everybody just once. But you mentioned those road trips, and certainly we'll see how it shakes out going to USC and UCLA. And USC has become, if you watch any, it was tough to watch Pac-12 games because they just weren't on nationally. The Pac-12 network was nowhere. But the games that you're able to see at USC, they've really brought out the stars there. I mean, Juju Watkins is, after Caitlin Clark graduates, certainly Juju Watkins is sort of become maybe the face of college basketball, if you will. And out there in LA, if you can be a star, she's an LA player. That has become, I think, a tough place to play. Ohio State has grown their fan base. I'm never intimidated by going to Maryland. They always have good teams. Brenda Freese again has hit the transfer portal and has come out as big as she's had. So it's tough to play there. It's not an intimidating place. I mean, I don't know that the place doesn't get really loud as it does at some of the other places, but the fact that you're playing everybody once, with the exception of one other, I mean, I think evens things out. Iowa comes to Champaign. And so from a schedule standpoint, from a conference standpoint, certainly the one that stands out is that trip to Los Angeles to play UCLA and USC.
If Maryland's environment becomes daunting and increased, then we're going to blame Mike Koon on episode 4 of the Dribble Drive podcast. He has awoken the Terps fans. You guys heard him right here. He wants you to be louder when he comes out to Maryland later this year. But I'm excited for the season, Mike. It feels like we're adding 2 national title contenders in UCLA and USC. How do you feel like the top of the Big Ten looks here? I know it's still early in July, but it's going to be a loaded conference, I think.
Yeah, I would put those 2 along with Maryland, Ohio State, probably in the upper tier. The second tier, Iowa, Indiana, Illinois, Nebraska, probably 5 through 8. And you can put those in any order. It's going to depend on how some of the newcomers come through. Michigan State, I think, what they were able to do last year to kind of come back, they have to reload. They did it with a lot of transfer players, so it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Purdue, I think they lost their freshman, who was. So we'll see what happens there. But I think those 8 are the teams that are going to be fun to watch. And, there will be some other teams that emerge that we don't know about.
Always. Every year there's always somebody.
I'm intrigued by Minnesota, honestly. Yeah. I think they're a team that could make some noise depending on what happens. But and also I'm excited about the new TV deal. I think that's going to really increase the exposure for Big Ten women's basketball.
Yeah, don't forget Deja Kelly is now at Oregon, along with a team that's completely retooled with transfers, and we know that Kelly Graves can coach, so I would expect Oregon to make some noise. This is a league that has been 7 deep in terms of the tournament the last 2 years. I think you could get 8, 9, 10 teams out of this league in the Big Dance next year, which would be a ton of fun. Mike, we really appreciate your time. Illinois has become one of my favorite watches and listens the past couple of years with the turnaround of this program. Looking forward to catching more of your stuff this year. Thanks so much for spending some of your afternoon with us.
Thanks, Austin. It will be an exciting year in Champaign. There's no doubt about it. They have some electric players and players that have really resonated with this fan base. And so with as you mentioned, all the Big Ten, the great teams in the Big Ten, it's going to be a really fun year.
Yeah, it's going to be as deep as we've ever seen this conference, and Illinois will be right in the thick of it. Mike, thanks for your time. We'll look forward to listening to you throughout the season. That's Mike Koon of the Illini Sports Network. A reminder to like and subscribe to our YouTube page, the Back Home Network, as well as leave us a rating on the iTunes and Spotify. We'd love to hear from all you as you listen to our podcast. We'll continue to go each Monday here with the Dribble Drive podcast. A big thank you to Mike Koon for joining us. We'll talk to you guys next Monday.